Hello, everyone. My name is Rimeike, and I'm the co-founder of Quantum Cybersecurity Skills for SOC optimization. Today, I have a great pleasure to introduce to you Marius Poskus from Dominos Pizza, who is expert, and I'm handing this over to you, Marius.
Hi everyone. Yeah, so my name is Marius. I've been in cyber for last 7-8 years. So just recently joined Dominos in helping mature their security program. Leading SOC communications, running vulnerability management program, and for intelligence. I've been also a speaker of few webinars recently where I spoke about my particular interests are in MITRE ATT&CK and how we can leverage MITRE ATT&CK framework in the cloud and best use cases for it. I'm also have a presentation coming up about business resilience in the cloud and how we can optimize specific tools and kind of leverage them in moving towards threat-informed defense. So that's kind of my field of expertise. We're gonna talk today about intelligence-driven incident response. So I would like to share.
And actually, for everyone, the way we met with Marius was through LinkedIn. We've been reading same book. And we've been messaging each other on LinkedIn and saying, "Hey, let's do a little interview about how we can improve security operations, how we can achieve more efficiency, and so on." So yeah, I think you should have the rights now to share your screen.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah, brilliant.
Okay, so let's.
It's a new level, Marius.
Yeah, 2 seconds. Let me just run through the slideshow. There we go. So first, I wanted to talk about how we can leverage intelligence-driven incident response in our organizations, and I think how the best way to approach it. It depends on the size of your organization, but if your organization is planning to start sort of ingesting intelligence-driven kind of incident response and ingesting various intel feeds and how we can leverage that to optimize and work towards post-incident analysis. I think there are key kind of aspects to consider with that, especially when we build a program, we need to think about kind of formulations and what kind of incident response frameworks we will use. So there's a few I would like to run through a few of them and how we can use them. So there's a few simple ones and then we go towards the complexity as it increases. So first and foremost, we can use something called OODA loop. So it goes through simple 4 steps. So how we can observe what's happening within our infrastructure, within our networks, how we can orient that and we decide and how we act from what we see. So the hard bit, I think, is sifting through the noise that you see. Good intelligence-driven incident response. I think the key aspect of that is building a good threat model and finding something that is relevant for your organization, and then applying it in a way that suits your organization. So there's plenty of work I think needs to be done before we start this, but there is ways, depending on the size of the organization, it can be one person who deals with threat intel, and you can have a team, but you can scale that as long as you have a sort of guidance and way that you think you can go forward. There's simple 4 steps that you can formulate into your incident response plans and see how that will, will help your organization be more aware what's wild, congregating various threat intel and leverage that for your defenses. Moving on to the next one is we have I think everyone's aware of cyber kill chain. So
Yeah.
that's kind of a level up where we go through, instead of kind of formulating the where we observe and orient, we go through all the steps that attackers would take, from reconnaissance to, intrusion, exploitation, privilege escalation, and all the way to exfiltration. That's every kind of APT goal. And you have, for example, this as you can see on the slide, there's some examples of the steps and attacks that would happen on your infrastructure. And you can go through each step and see what for example attackers would do and how would they approach specific steps and how you can mitigate them in your organization. There is various tools within OSINT environment that you can use to see, to consider. I think some companies sometimes overshare information, which makes APTs easy to discover. Reconnaissance, for example. People are scanning things like LinkedIn. Your job posts. Sometimes people leak too much information in terms of the tools they use, in terms of posting too many. Even sometimes posting too many emails on your website can lead to phishing attacks and things like that. So there is tools and there is considerations to be made what you share in the wild and how you approach this kind of exercise, and how you kind of negate some of the risks that pose, and how you reduce your basically attack surface moving forward. Next one to consider is the diamond model. Is basically how interaction between adversary, your infrastructure, and their capabilities point towards victims. It's sometimes people forget, but you need to think about that kind of relationship and how for example how adversary. It's kind of a diamond model. How, for example, adversary would use their capabilities to interact with your infrastructure and basically how you can end up being a victim of that kind of attack, and what can be done to kind of move that relationship in your favor.
And
And
Marius,
talking about,
I
yes,
wanted to say that you are touching very hot topic in the SOCs today. We are all talking for years and years about alert fatigue, but not only we are trying to resolve the alert fatigue, one of the major points is, are we tracking the right information? And how do we combine, how do we capture the required information, the key information to build a story, to build the intelligence to help us make the right decisions more dynamically, faster, and so on. Very hot topic that you are discussing today.
yeah, and I will lead later on in my talk about alert fatigue and things like that. But I think the key aspect is if people are ingesting various sometimes IOCs just for the sake of ingestion. There are various platforms that share what's happening out there in the wild, but you need to sift through what's relevant for your organization, what applies to your kind of organization, and where and how they how you operate. For example, our business works in a retail environment, so our IOCs will not be relevant what's happening in a banking environment and things like that. So you have to sift through that information and kind of correlate and kind of ingest what's working for you. For example, I'll share you in a minute a pyramid of pain, and how, for example, APTs would change their tactics or their techniques, and how you can change, for example, hashing values and IOCs, which you have to think about as well. There are programs, for example, we in Azure Sentinel, we can ingest IOCs, but we can give them a time limit, for example, that maybe after 6 months they'll be depreciated. So there's no point of scanning our environment after 6 months that something's been out there in the wild for a couple of years and not going to be used again. So
Correct.
it's a very important point, and it's very interesting. It's very important to think, for example, because when I talk about with new vendors as well, that we talk about bringing their tools for us. One of the main questions I ask for them is, how do you integrate with our environment? We have various great tools, but it's talking about alert fatigue and working, SOC engineers to the ground. For example, sometimes you have 10, 12 great tools, but if you have in a day sift through 12 different dashboards, it's very hard and it's very time consuming. So congregating, building data connectors that you can congregate that in one seam, that can greatly help, and building rules that sift through that information, and kind of maturing that, fine tuning, taking out false negatives or false positives, and fine tuning that alert fatigue, that can greatly help your organization. So leading on to the next one, and kind of probably the most mature, is the F3 EAD, and that kind of intelligence life cycle comes from military, and I think it can have a great use for us. Especially, we have the whole F3 EID process, as you can see on the bottom right. Find, fix, finish, exploit, analyze, and disseminate. But analyze can create a whole another life cycle, where how your intelligence feeds into that life cycle, in terms of operational, tactical, and strategic level. How you can collate the information that you see from threat intel, how you can feed that to your business, to your board, and make informed decisions, how they can decide where we can make investments in the future, and how we can shape our kind of threat intel program moving forward. So there's great aspects that can come out of it, and how we can use that for all our organizations. So
Marius, may I ask you, let's share
Yeah.
the slide you're talking about, because I only see intelligence-driven incident response by Marius Poskus. I see the top slide.
You can see only the top slide, because I can on my.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yep, can you see that one?
If you click on it, I should be able to see a big screen. Yeah, yeah, coming, fantastic.
Yeah, yeah. So that's the kind of the life cycle of F3 EAD, intelligence integration, and at all three levels, how we can integrate from operational, tactical, and strategic, and how it feeds our making informed decisions for the organization, and how we can benefit in maturing our all of that. And then what we touched earlier, and I think it's a great place to view that, is the pyramid of pain. So for example, as I mentioned, when we ingest our threat intelligence, the key aspects to discuss is how APTs operate, and how they would use specific tools or specific tactics to attack your environment. So as I mentioned before, for example, if they use specific tools, it's kind of very trivial to change a hash value of specific tools. So if you're scanning your environment for specific hashes, these hashes might be irrelevant a couple of weeks down the line, because they can easily change hash values. They can easily change things like IP addresses. But what they can't change easily is things like TTPs, their tactics, their techniques, and their procedures, and ultimately their goals. So that's what we should focus about, because there is important information regarding various APTs and how they operate. For example, MITRE ATT&CK framework, they do great work with sharing what procedures the various APTs use, what tools they use. But you need to remember that, for example, there is a big black market where some of the APTs recycle their tools. Some of the tools have been sold on. So this leads to kind of talking about attribution. I think sometimes people jump to attributing specific attacks to specific APTs, where that not necessarily is the case. You need to focus about more about their techniques and their tactics, not necessarily attributing specific to something to specific group, the way they operate. So there's great deal to be discussed and thought about. I think that's why, for example, we are leveraging things like user behavior analytics nowadays, and kind of congregating and kind of seeing a bigger picture of instead of just looking at specific hash values. We can see how how they behave, looking at you can sift through various research about specific groups, and seeing behavior kind of matches in your environment, and kind of leading that towards to discuss about the tools that we can leverage in our environment to use. I personally kind of interact with a few of these tools, and there's some great stuff. For example, you can use something like Cybersecurity, which is it's called in kind of in the community as a cybersecurity Swiss Army knife, where you can see any hashes that you see, any IP addresses. It's a great tool to for de-obfuscation. It can help to decode hex base 64 and all that kind of things. You can use, for example, great threat intel sharing platforms, MISP, Crits, and Yeti. Sometimes I think sometimes people in organizations, obviously depending on your budgeting, we focus too much on enterprise level kind of tools, and some of these can cost a great deal amount of money. I have friends that stood up their whole security program on open source intelligence tools, and you can do that pretty much for free. And there's great tools out there. For example, Maltego is great when you collate specific evidence that you can see in your environment. You can push that all into Maltego, and you can visualize that. And for example, from that, when you create your hypotheses, and for example, building your hypothesis matrix to think that how these APTs interact, it will give you a great kind of visualization tool, and sometimes it helps in kind of piecing things together, and it can help, for example, see how specific evidence interacts with each other within the wild, whether that leads into for example, platforms, various platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and all that. This, for example, the same as Shodan is. I always use is a powerful tool for sifting through various IP addresses and seeing the information that correlates within domains and subdomains. TweetDeck again is a powerful tool to monitor Twitter accounts and congregate information that's relevant for you, so you can search there for specific kind of keywords and kind of congregate all the searches in one place. So you can put in your organization name, you can add words like credentials and see if anyone's posting that kind of information, and just kind of use that to the best of your advantage. And I think the kind of last and least what I want to touch on is that when you build your kind of threat intel information within your organization, is you need to think about consumer profile and how you build those threat intelligence. You need to consider the audience, whether you're doing a threat intelligence piece for another analyst, or what you're doing for a C-suite level exec. You need to think about their technical ability and what they want to to get out of your threat intel kind of information piece that you're building. Ideally you can build a short profile. For example, my CISO, for example, say he likes a one-page information and he's quite technical, so I would include things like like I mentioned, ROCs, hash values, what's out there. We can add specific techniques or specific for example, from MITRE ATT&CK procedures that they would use, and you can consider the form itself. Sometimes if you're building a big piece for a C-suite level exec, sometimes it can be 10 pages long, and it depends on your time framework. Sometimes your CISO will just ask a question, and you can build that into an email, or there's various things to consider how we share that information. And so yeah, that's kind of the things that I wanted to touch on, and see if you have any questions, Emma.
Yes, I mean it's fantastic, as you say, that you took an effort to prepare some slides. I do have a question. When I was reading about F3 EAD, right? It's fantastic that it combines two cycles into one sort of continuous framework to benefit multiple teams. But at the same time, I was thinking how sustainable it is. What what are the expectations, as in time savings and so on? Because SOCs, I don't need to tell you, you are an expert in SOCs. Usually one of the biggest complaints is they say we don't have enough time in a day to do everything, right? So, of course, we do need to work smarter, and this is one of the approach that delivers that way of driving, combining intelligence gathering to feed into security operations from incident response and kill chain perspective. But as I say, how sustainable it is, how someone from threat intel or risk department can access the right information immediately. And you talked also, information can be the depreciating in value very quickly because things are changing almost on a daily basis. So let's talk a little bit about sustainability and how to best implement it in a way that it's relevant, it's always up to date, and everyone accesses the right information at the right time in easy way.
Yeah, I think scalability is very important, and I think obviously this kind of intelligence process itself, it can be scaled to, as I mentioned before, from small teams to big teams. But the key aspect is the preparation that you do with it. So you need to make sure that you select intelligence that's relevant to your organization, and obviously ingest as much as you can obviously handle. But I think the key aspect of how this works, and if you can see the another kind of cycle that analyze step creates is creating kind of analytical information. So analyzing post-incident analysis and kind of storing that somewhere in one place within your organization. Sometimes it can take a while, but sometimes it takes only an hour, maybe a week, to just go through post-incident, gather evidence and what you have found, and congregate that in one place. And then from that, doing your research whenever you have a spare minute, build a profile of what's out there, what's kind of relevant for your organization, and how it feeds into your kind of decisions, how you can protect yourself, what worked for specific for actors, what didn't work, and what they are using to attack your specific organization.
Yeah.
And that can feed into your kind of life cycle of any attacks that happen will create another kind of intelligence life cycle itself. So you can see what you can find about specific from you can use, as I mentioned, various tools, various there's vast information out there. There's researchers doing that information for you. You just need to collect what's relevant for yourself, for your organization, and put that somewhere in one place to build a kind of a better picture of what's kind of impacting your organization.
Would you consider putting this as a part of runbooks, playbooks, or that's too complex?
I think you can build various aspects of it into playbooks and runbooks, because obviously, I think everyone's sometimes we build everything that's become too complicated. I think we need to simplify our kind of SOC work, simplify the tasks that we do, and making the whole process more simplistic. Sometimes you can obviously some specific attacks that you see every day, and they are easy to resolve. You can automate them, so make your your valuable time get extra free time for yourself, because as we mentioned before, alert fatigue and all that leads to sometimes we are swamped with work that we're doing. We normally just firefighting, but
Yeah.
automation, ingesting threat intel and building better picture, I think leads us to towards the place where we can go on the attack and build that threat informed defense instead of being reactive, going towards being proactive and doing something before something happens.
Correct.
Building that picture will help us go towards that place and being more mature.
I've been reading 451 research reports about that SIMS, security incident and event management system, are usually capturing about 45% of logs ingested from log generating systems. And the same report also talked about that about 45% of organizations simply miss out on 25% of alerts generated by security systems. And I was again thinking, and this is $1 million question, how to simplify, how, be it through grouping, or be it through, grouping, by clustering, or or do we need to apply better filters? Because alert fatigue is one of the reasons, in I would say one of top 5 reasons why SOC analysts churn, because it's just too much, it's too repetitive, it's too much, and it's simply not efficient. It's companies are paying for expensive administrators, but not for, there has to be a smarter way how we can deal with this big problem. What is your opinion on this?
I think obviously, yeah, there are downfalls, there are shortcomings in that sense, but I think the key aspect of this is sometimes, as I mentioned before, we need to make sure that we ingest what's relevant. We need to make sure we deal with priorities and what's relevant, and I think the key aspect of here is correlation. So not only ingesting logs from endpoints, but looking at traffic, your network traffic, and adding that user behavior analytics point of that, using machine learning and SOAR tools will help us to fine tune that, building a specific rules that that kind of correlate all that information together and kind of reduce the noise. If you have a specific false positives or false negatives, always happening on your environment, don't just don't just kind of solve that specific alert, but look at where it's coming from, look at the source point, how we can stop that from happening, how we can fine tune our ingestion, our reporting tools, our logs, that we can optimize everything and bring everything into one place. I think the key aspect on here is correlation and leveraging machine learning, leveraging those baselines, and then you can do your investigation, what kind of deviates from your baselines. But obviously there's some work to be done to build those baselines, to correlate all those events and build that picture that, that will help you, your investigation. And as I mentioned, doing playbooks, automation, can help you save so much time in kind of sifting through specific incidents that happen where, you can solve them with one click of a button.
Yeah, no, 100%. Another thing, just to summarize, I've been reading this one. So this book, how to calculate, how to measure anything in cybersecurity risk. And one of the, elements they are discussing, they say It's inefficient and unsustainable for the organizations to sort of drop a blanket on everything and try to protect everything. What they suggest, it needs to be tiered approach, very important crown jewels. This is our focus. Everyone needs to know what they are, be it applications, be it IP, and so on. So this is, and we're gonna invest technology to focus on this. If it is a different level of information, not as important, we will sort of it's will sort of say, okay, if there is a breach, it will not cause us too much business impact, in terms of monetary loss value and so on. So they are definitely saying, prioritize what you are protecting, because you are spreading yourselves too thin. So again, what are your thoughts on this? Working in SOC, in very busy SOC, driving the maturity, driving the dynamics and so on. How do you see this from your perspective? Tiered approach to protect key crown jewels, let's put
Yeah,
it this way.
I think it's a good point, because normally, like, if you build any kind of threat model for your organization, and the way you think you're going to approach your kind of security maturity aspect of it, you always think first, okay, where is your crown jewels? Where is your kind of business greatest risk? What happens? How what your business could not operate without, and you put that at the beginning. And for example, whether you were working in the PCI environment or HIPAA, and things like that. Where is that data? For example, our website going down, that would be a great business impact. So that's kind of our, say for example, that's our crown jewel. So we would go in kind of looking at the risk-based approach. That's our biggest risk. So we will obviously have the biggest resource spent in that sense, and we'll make sure that that is locked up. It's segregated from anything else. That's kind of the crown jewels, and that's where we will spend the most money in protecting, and the most time and effort to make sure that this is secure. We'll have the strictest of rules in terms of firewalls and protection on that space, especially if you are PCI compliant, things like customer information, that will be your crown jewels and protect. And obviously from that sense, once you secure your crown jewels, then you can, looking at kind of risk-based approach, you look at your next most important target, and then you build out information to the last. I mean, build your protection to the last piece. For example, if you compare the two things, if some lady sitting at reception and her laptop is hacked, is not necessarily, it's nowhere near the same as someone, if one of your web servers going to be down.
Yeah.
So the same as, I think most of these kind of leads to various aspects. For example, I know most of the companies do the same approach in terms of your vulnerability management. How you prioritize which vulnerabilities you're gonna eliminate first, and obviously you kind of spend the most time and kind of build the kind of more stricter SLAs on your crown jewels than you would anywhere else. So you have that criticality level added to your specific assets, where you will create a kind of a higher alerts for your critical assets, and then you build from that, going down towards from highest risk to least.
Yeah. No, Marius, I mean, it's been fantastic interview. It didn't feel like an interview. It felt like I'm sitting on your webinar. Brilliant insights. I can't imagine, I can't believe. I mean, we went from 15 minutes to almost half an hour or so.
Yeah.
But look, thank you so much for agreeing to be part of a SOC optimization interview. Thanks for sharing your insights. Great books that you're reading. It's very inspirational. And I just want to say thank you. And there is definitely a lot of information people who are going to be viewing this interview will benefit from. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. And, it's always a great pleasure to share information. I think especially, from what I can see over the last year, especially, for example, in my LinkedIn, the communities have been great, and there's people who are ready to help anyone. There's been amount of people that help me, that I help someone. There's that sense of kind of ownership, and everyone wants to share and help each other. And I think cybersecurity is a great kind of community to be a part of. And yeah, thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. My pleasure.
No problem.
Bye.